We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's January 12th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yeun. I'm the news anchor of Arirang's new daily morning program, News Generation, where young people make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Choi Ji-hee.
Good morning, Yeun.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here today.
Both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, every day we'll make a news feed for the new generation, and we're looking at the top trending hashtags on social media like Twitter in the past 24 hours. So here's the 3 hashtags. The first is Guinness World Record. Elon Musk, the Tesla boss and now the owner of Twitter, made it into the record books for seeing his fortune shrink by a whopping $182 billion. He took the record from Japanese investor Masayoshi Son, who lost $58.6 billion in 2000. Musk lost a lot last year, mainly due to the drop in Tesla shares, which lost roughly 65% of their value. The next hashtag is Coachella headliner, because K-pop superstars Blackpink will be the first K-pop artist ever to headline Coachella, one of the biggest U.S. music and art festivals. Blackpink had previously performed at Coachella in 2019. They'll be returning this April, which will definitely delight a lot of international fans. The last hashtag is Buka Reservation. A mobile puzzle game called Buka Puzzle Adventure, featuring the popular Korean character Buka, will soon be released, and developers opened up a global pre-registration a few weeks back so that people who do pre-register can receive gems and tokens that can be used to unlock legendary characters in the game. Buka was developed in 2002 and was the most popular character in Korea for 6 consecutive years from 2015 until 2021. Now, what do you think, and why do you think the new generation was interested in these particular hashtags, Ji-hee?
Well, I think for the first hashtag, Elon Musk, I think it's because many youngsters, including myself at one point in the past, have invested in Tesla. So what this means is if Elon Musk loses money, then we also do lose money. So I guess that's why youngsters were very interested in news related to him.
Right, because it affects our investments,
Yes.
right? What about you, Walter?
Well, going to Blackpink, they're always trending, right? And I think this year is going to be fantastic for them because not only are they headlining Coachella, which is in the US, they're also headlining in the UK, the Hyde Park Festival.
Wow.
So it's a huge year for Blackpink and for Blackpink fans as well.
Right, great news for Blinks out there. And I think Buka, you know, as I explained before, it's such a legendary and popular character here in Korea. It's also one of my personal favorites, so I'm also very excited for this new game. All right, thank you to you both. Let's wrap up for our news feed for today. And News Gen will discuss different topics each day, and here's what topic we have for you.
Marriage. Is it old but gold? For starters, it is a tradition that's been around for thousands of years. The first recorded evidence of a marriage ceremony bringing together a man and a woman dates back more than 4,000 years ago to Mesopotamia. But many agree that the actual origin dates well before recorded history. Whether marriage is gold depends on who you're asking. If you're asking the new generation, comprised of millennials and Gen Z, most would say not really. Back in 2021, Seoul City asked whether people born between the years 1980 and 2004 think marriage is a must. Only a little over 4% said yes. Earlier this week, Statistics Korea found that more women are getting married in their 30s rather than their 20s. So though marriage is an old institution, it's also one that could be dying out. Today, News Gen aims to answer 3 main questions. 1. What do young people think about marriage? 2. Why is the marriage rate relatively lower for these generations compared to others? 3. What type of measures should be taken to help those who want to get married?
So today we'll talk about marriage. It's such a big topic, lots to talk about, and that's why I prepared an O and X game with a few questions. Hold up the O sign if you agree, and the X sign if you want to say no. The first question is quite simple, and I want to ask Walter, are you happily married?
Well, I think...
It's taking you a
oh wait,
while.
I'll put 2 O's up there. Yes, I am happily married. And I have a little, I guess, message out there for my beautiful wife. So if the PD could just turn on some music for me, just so I can set the mood. Ah, there we go. So, my dear, beautiful wife, how much I love you and thank you for marrying me. I'm sorry that I'm not very good at cleaning the dishes or washing the dishes the way you want or folding the laundry like you always tell me to do. But I'll try my best to do better and I love you very much.
Okay, Walter, how do you really feel?
Oh my God, don't get married. Do not get married, no. I had freedom, I had money. Oh, it's a very big task.
I love how the music just faded out immediately as soon as you revealed your true spirits.
I love you, my wife.
Yes, you do. And what about you, Ji? Are you married?
No, I'm not married, but I do want to get married sometime in the future. And I'm 32 currently. I believe Walter got married at my age right now.
Around that time, yes.
Yes, and if I were to get married though, I don't believe it's a must, but if I were to get married, I want to get married around 35. It could be earlier or later than that.
I think everyone has that age that they think of. Well, not everyone, but a lot of people, including myself. I too wanted to get married when I'm 25. I'm 27 now. So we'll see. Yes. All right, so the next question is, do you think it's okay to live with your romantic partner without being married? And why don't we start with Walter again?
I think it's okay to live with your romantic partner without being married because I would say that it's kind of like trying before you buy in a way, testing out the waters before you completely dive in. When you get married, you're with them every day, and though that's romantic and I love living with my wife every day, however, there are so many things to consider, what they're like on an everyday basis. Can you deal with their bad side as well? That's why I think you should at least try it before you commit to marriage.
Right, so there's a lot of things that you want to check before you get married, right?
Of course.
And what about you, Jihi?
I actually agree with Walter, although the culture here is not as open or liberal as that in the Western world, because we grew up, most of us, under conservative parents. But then in the end, it's your life. If you are deciding, or if you're not able to decide whether to marry this person or not, then I think living with the person and staying with the person for 24/7 will help you decide and make the most important decision in life, because you're together with the person every day, and it's different from just dating them twice or 3 times a week, really.
Right.
So go ahead, yeah.
It's definitely different, and you pointed out that we grew up under a very Confucian system. We were taught that it's always best to, separate dating, marriage is quite different, the traditional way. But as you said, at the end of the day, it's about 2 happy people wanting to get married.
Exactly. If you think you'll be happier knowing this person by living with the person, then why not?
I know, go for it. Now, the next question I have for you is, do you think it's okay to, do you think there's a certain age you have to get married by?
So I'm going to go with a big fat no for this one, because I think you see couples all the time getting married very young, 19, 20, even younger, sometimes younger, and they work out. They have happy families. They're together for a very, very long time. Then you have couples at the so-called ripe age, let's say between mid-20s to mid-30s, and they don't work out. But then you also see couples that get married when they're 50, 60 years old, and they work out. So I can't imagine there being a good age to get married at.
Right. What about you, G? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a no and a yes for me. No, because I don't believe there's the age in which you have to get married. In fact, the average age of adults here, women and men, getting married has been getting older. In fact, as of 2021, the average age of getting married for women it was 31.1, and for men it was 33.4. And for women, it surpassed 30 for the first time, whereas for men, it surpassed 30 back in 2005, so it was a little different for them. But it's also a no for me for women, because it's different for women who want to get married and have children at the same time, because although, of course, medicine and technology, science has been improving, but biologically, the risk of having birth increases with age. So
Right.
I think women who do want to get married and have children too do consider their age
There's
as well.
lots to consider for
Yes.
sure. And thank you so much for you guys efficiently using your 2 signs. I love how this is our new thing at
Yes,
NewsGen.
it is.
We're very efficient with what we have. Now, if we drop our signs for a second, and I want to just, compile all of your answers, I feel like the concept of marriage has really changed, and definitely because the age of when you're supposed to supposedly get married has changed as well. But I feel it's more leaning towards a lot of people refraining from getting married, and that's why I want to ask why.
Well, there's a lot of trends that are happening these days when it comes to reasons not to get married. And I think the most popular or most well-known trend is the lack of money. Now, I know that weddings are quite expensive here in South Korea. Now, a lot of Western countries might say, why don't you try a beach wedding, or why don't you try a garden wedding, or a smaller wedding? For people who don't know, smaller weddings in South Korea are actually still quite expensive.
They are.
And we don't have the most beautiful beaches, sadly, or there aren't a lot of availability for garden weddings. So we don't have that option as well. And plus, it's inbuilt in our culture. We're a very money-giving culture. We have chugigum, or the money gift for our bride and groom, which also is a burden for the guests as well. I feel like I've spent more money on my friends than I've spent on my wife. So this is a part of our culture, sadly.
Right, and I'd like to cautiously just say, you're from Australia, so we might have a different perception on beautiful beaches, but there are a lot of beautiful beaches here in Korea.
Beautiful beaches, but when you come from Australia, no beach compares.
Right. What about you, Ji?
Well, I totally agree that many youngsters choose not to get married when they're younger because they think that they're not financially ready yet.
Right.
And also they think about freedom, maybe they want to live a free life for longer. And I also think that they could be a little pickier in choosing who to get married to.
Right.
The characteristics that you look, or the traits you look for in a potential marriage partner could be a little picky for the youngsters, I believe. What is important for you, would you say?
I think personality.
Agree.
And if you're happy with that person, go for it. But I don't think that's being picky. I just think you're trying to look for your perfect love of your life, right?
And I think that's a wiser way of choosing who to get married to.
Right.
Yes.
Do you have any characteristics that you look for?
Personality, definitely.
Yes.
And also the looks is also important. It's one of the important traits that many people believe. And also the job, potential for growth, and the importance for how wealth is also different depending on the person. And also the family and the childhood, the environment in which you grew up in, are all very considered as important traits for people.
Right, and I don't know about you guys, but I related so much to our pre-discussion so far, and I think our viewers might have a lot of ideas on what the new gen views on marriage. So stay tuned here to hear more about our discussion. All right, earlier in the studio, we talked about why the new generation is waiting longer to get married compared to older generations. We also looked at different opinions on the concept of marriage. Now we'll be hearing some insights from an expert in this field. Joining us on Zoom is Meredith Churitz, editor of BBC Work Life, currently in New York. Welcome.
Good morning. It's so nice to be here.
Now, Meredith, are there any studies that pin down the reasons behind younger people deciding not to get married?
Yes, so there's actually quite a lot of data that's been collected throughout the past 3 years for Pew Research Center, which is really one of our main ways that we gather and analyze data in the US. We have really seen that for people at prime working age, a lack of financial readiness, as you were talking about, is a major factor in why people are either delaying marriage or not getting married at all. It's both their own finances as well as their partner's finances. A third of the respondents to the Pew survey that we looked at cited both their partner's finances as well as theirs as a concern. And I think that's a big important piece because reaching milestones for millennials and Gen Z has become significantly more difficult, as well as starting a family because of financial considerations and cost of living. And so one of the knock-on effects of this is that marriage is becoming kind of a, if you'd like to say, a casualty of the cost of living and the delayed milestones.
I see. And I'm sure Jihi and Walter may have some questions for you. Jihi, why don't you ask a question?
Right, so my question to you is, how are people's changing attitudes and perspectives on marriage affecting whether people choose to marry or not?
So this, I think, is actually one of the most interesting changes that we're seeing, especially globally. Within the US, marriage is really no longer seen as sort of the default place that a couple ends up by a growing number of people. And Gen Z is really one of the major groups that's driving this. They believe that it's kind of not a means toward an end when you get in a relationship with someone. There's also a big regional difference in Western states, such as Colorado and Washington. These states are more likely to have couples who are married versus Eastern states. Connecticut, Vermont, those are examples. And those really have to do with traditions and values and a lot of time religious backgrounds too. Especially with religion, people who are more conservative and are coming from more conservative backgrounds, they haven't changed their views on marriage quite as much as some of the people in other groups have.
And do you actually see this trend continuing at all?
It's possible. One big piece of this is education and workforce participation for women is a big driver in the decline in marriage, and that seems poised to continue. And then Gen Z, as they kind of rise into this marriage age, they are continuing to delay because of these financial reasons. They want to establish themselves first. They want to establish their careers first. Many people are even actually moving back in with their parents. And there's been a rise in the number of unpartnered people, which is, much, much higher than it was about 30 years ago. So trends in the way that societal attitudes are moving makes us seem like this actually could continue, if not rise.
Right. And Meredith, thank you so much for providing insight on what's happening in the United States. I think we can relate, though, because it's similar to what's happening here. And what are the financial differences between being married and unmarried in the United States right now?
So within the US, there's actually a pretty significant advantage financially to being married. From a tax perspective, first and foremost, systems tend to favor married couples in terms of tax breaks or even things like declaring bankruptcy. You also have dual incomes when you're buying a home. And for instance, that can be favored too, whether that's because combined you have better credit history or a higher base income. And then because insurance is privatized here, insurance can be less expensive when you don't have to pay individually. So those are really big advantages. And society is really at this point set up to mostly support that. In contrast, unpartnered adults statistically have lower earnings on average than partnered adults. They're less likely to be employed or economically independent. So this lack of marriage actually has broader financial and economic implications. And generally tax systems are really not set up to support people who are not married. So there are definitely implications that go a little bit further than just sort of whom you're living with or what your romantic status is.
Right. Thank you so much, Meredith. You've provided a great insight for us all. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Now, if we bring back the discussion to the studio, if you guys can briefly comment on any of Meredith's comments that fascinated you.
Well, for me, definitely it was the financial situation. It seems to be almost everyone's go-to answer when they say, why aren't we getting married? Why have we decided not to get married? I mean, even before I got married, it was something that we talked about. How are we going to financially pay for everything? And it's not just the wedding itself, it's what comes after the wedding, the house. Here in Korea, like we sort of mentioned in our opening questions, it's not normal for us to move in before we get married. So the house and also the marriage ceremony or the wedding ceremony at the same time is extremely burdensome for some.
Right.
And I particularly liked how Meredith said marriage is no longer the traditional way of couples ending up together. And I believe marriage is a legal system that's not necessarily makes individuals happier, but it's more of something that's beneficial to society in the beginning. So I liked how she commented on that. Yes.
Right, and now I think it's time to point out some comments that our viewers have for us. Given that we are a morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time live to share with you what they had to say. And we asked what they thought about marriage and whether they found it necessary. So if you take a look at the screen, here's what they had to say. So Alexandra Carrico 1765 said marriage is the best possible partnership for two humans to live side by side through life. Of course, belief systems influence its structure, but overall, if the pair agreeably negotiate and commit to each other, their lives will be more content and healthier and productive. Now, if you're having children, then that's from RIP Haven. She said, if you're having children, then yes, but just remember the leading cause of divorce is marriage. Asian Prince 8718 said, I think it depends on the circumstances. So these were a few comments from our viewers. What do you think, guys?
Well, very interesting. I wanted to mention Alexander saying marriage is the best possible partnership. I totally agree, and I sometimes even think that it's an M&A of two people. Yes, from an economic point of view, you're doing it for the better of the two, right? And I also think it still depends on the circumstances. We've been talking about financially prepared. That's what's important for us to get married as youngsters. Yes.
I see. What about you, Walter?
Well, I have to comment on @RipHaven. I like the tagline, the leading cause of divorce is marriage, and 100% correct there. But I do have a lot of friends these days who are choosing not to get married but still have children. And I think this is also a change in times. It's definitely not something that happens here in South Korea as of yet, but in Western countries it's becoming more and more common.
And every day we will upload questions like this related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. So if you want to participate, please search Arirang News on YouTube and look into our community tab. Now, we've already come to the very last part of our discussions. I'm so sad. But wrapping up, why don't you guys share your final thoughts on marriage, starting with Jihi?
Sure. So I want to tell all the people out there, the youngsters especially, to not be pressured to get married because of the standards and the stereotypes that society puts on you, especially here in Korea, based on age and custom, etc. I feel like the reason divorce rates are going up in the country is because people make hasty decisions when it comes to marriage, although it's a very important life decision. And so if you want to choose to get married then and commit yourself to a person and change your entire lifestyle, you really need to take your time to really see if the partner that's next to you is the right person. And in the end, you're getting married to live a happier life, right? And you really have to listen to your inner voice. If there are red flags, don't ignore them. And I also want to mention this one sentence. It's originally in Korean, but translated into English, it goes, life is really about you either bear with the loneliness of living alone for the entire life, or bear with living the other or a stranger for the entire life. So listeners out there, what would you choose to bear with?
That's a great way to end. And what about you, Walter? Any advice?
So I've chosen to live with my beautiful wife, and I'm happily married. But at the end of the day, I'm also a person that advocates people who don't want to get married. I completely understand it. It's a huge commitment. It's a life commitment, supposedly, so we should think very carefully. Now, we are getting more divorces, as Chihi said, and I think, especially with people not getting married, that number one reason is usually finances. Now, sadly, in South Korea, we are a very rapidly aging society. So we want to have more babies here in South Korea. So maybe we should give incentives. The government should give incentives to married couples, maybe helping them out with the ceremony to lessen the financial burden. That's what I want to see from South Korea.
Right, definitely. Thank you so much today. And today we talked about how the new generation feels about getting married and the concept of marriage itself. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Chee.
Thank you very much.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here again.
Both were joining me here in the studio. And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow morning because we are
News Generation.